like, well, if I throw a mic on, then I can help others the way that these people have all helped me.
Born in the heart of the Pennsylvania deer camp. With the help of experts, friends, and local legends, we bring you valuable knowledge and powerful stories for your hunting adventures. Welcome to the East Meets West Hunt Podcast with your host, Beau Martonik.
All right, we're good. Chris Leppert, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks, dude.
Yeah, it's good to get to talk to you here. And this is the first time, because I don't think we had met in person yet, but we've talked on the phone, but haven't got to actually meet you. Now we're virtually meeting through video. So
Yeah. Eventually, this August.
Yeah, no, exactly, man. I'm super excited to come out there for the Mobile Hunter Expo in August, and you know, one of the reasons that you're coming on is, and how I got to meet you, I guess I should say, is through the Mobile Hunter Expo, which we'll get into here in a little bit. But do you want to tell the audience a little bit about yourself, where you're from, and kind of what makes you tick with hunting?
Yeah. So my name's Christopher Leppert. I'm from Southern Ohio. Started hunting when I was 7 years old. Did some upland games, small games, stuff like that with my uncle, and did a little bit of coon hunting with my grandfather, who was from Tennessee. And then right around 1998, I got into bow hunting for whitetails and fell in love with archery, fell in love with whitetails. And ever since then, I've kind of been obsessed with it. Pretty big turkey hunter as well. And then started a social media page in 2017, and that kind of led to us starting a podcast and YouTube channel. And then we came up with the idea for the Mobile Hunter Expo, and it's just kind of blossomed. My love for whitetails. I've been fortunate to scout and talk with some pretty high level hunters, in my opinion. One, I think Jake Bush. Yep. So I've just been really blessed to be able to learn from a lot of really good hunters, and kind of almost rekindled my love for whitetails in a completely different way. Started hunting a completely different way. I used to hunt exclusively private land, and I sat over bait and hunted the same tree 100 trillion times a year, and had the same giant deer on camera at 2, 3, 4 in the morning, and couldn't buy a daylight. And then lo and behold, I start this different way of hunting and start hunting public land, because I found out how depressing private land small tracks really were. If you're not in the game, you're way out of the game. You can't really do anything about it. And I like to be aggressive and efficient. So I went to almost exclusively public land. And since then, my hunting career has gotten better. I've consistently killed bigger and better deer. And it's just been a really neat sort of transition, I guess, to learn a completely different way how to target mature bucks, basically.
Yeah, I mean, it kind of makes it where it's like a whole new thing for you, to like a new experience, and start like kind of like when I first started going out hunting elk out west. It's like brand new to me. I don't know anything about it. So just like going in eyes wide open and doing that. And it's kind of the same with going from, those small private chunks to going to public. I hunted a small private chunk in Ohio, and I think I've talked about it before. This was probably 10 years ago now. And it was like 50 acres, which isn't like incredibly small, but it's small enough that when the neighbors had, a ton of bait and good food, that deer didn't hold there. It was like during the rut, they'd pass through, and there were some good funnels, and I'd shot a couple deer doing that in the 2 years that I had it. But it was a piece of ground that I leased, and but I was like, man, I hate being out of the game all the time. Like, I get it. I hear it from people like, oh, you're a public land guy. You're a public land guy. And it's like, no, like when I first got a lease down in West Virginia, like, oh, I thought you were a public land guy. And it's like, I'm an opportunist, but the reason why I don't love private a lot of times, one, if I could afford a big piece, I definitely would. But if the small chunks, I don't like not be having the ability to go find them and go. Like I like having expansive tracks that, it's really up to me whether I can find them or go after it. It doesn't have to do with the borders that are blocking me from, getting to those places. And that's what is appealing and fun about it.
Oh yeah, I agree 100%. Learning from some of these guys, I would just have these aha moments where I'd be sitting there thinking, how much time did you waste sitting? I used to do 50, 60, 70 sits a year, just crazy. Any chance I could get, I'd go hunting. And now I'm like pissed if I don't have a buck down in like 3 to 5 sits, and that's on the higher end. So it's one of those things where, and I'm a little older. I'll be 40 in May. I've got 3 kids, a wife, whole 9, 1 kid in sports, another in dance, and my little boy, I've got one with a rut birthday and the other with a turkey season birthday. So you really have to be efficient with your time if you want to do this at all when you have a family like that. So it's really forced me to learn how to be more efficient and just kind of strike quick, as I call it. So I can't do the whole stay out until the time is right. Not like I just want to go hunting, and I also would much rather go hunting early season or later rather than the rut, because there's more pressure in the rut, and the rut, it's just not as controlled to me. I'm not saying that you can't do it consistently, but I am not good at it. And I find my favorite thing is early season because I feel like the thermals are more predictable. I'm pretty big on thermal-based movement over really just about anything. I feel like I see more bucks move when the thermal switch happens than anything. You can throw wind direction out. They're dropping down wind to back at where I hunt, and they're using the thermal pull. And if the wind is like crazy, then I just don't see them generally. They don't feel comfortable, I think. So that's why I like early season a lot.
Yeah, and when you're saying when the wind is crazy, do you mean as far as like the wind speed's high enough that they're kind of overriding the thermals?
That and gusting, back and forth, and it's just unpredictable. And I hunt a lot of water access, and I feel like watching how the deer react there has taught me a lot about how they use the thermals. And I mean, there are places that I hunt where no matter what the wind direction is, they do the same thing every day, because that water is, for the most part, making the thermals do the same thing every day, unless you have like a crazy overpowering wind. But in that case, oftentimes I still see them end up hitting the ag fields because they get out there early and feel more comfortable out there where they can see, and there's not a bunch of branches and stuff blowing in the wind and everything and freaking them out. You know how they are.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah. Anything can do that, especially with those old deer like that.
Yeah. Super cagey.
It's funny. I was in a spot scouting the other day, and I went to this area because there was a buck on a neighboring ridge that showed up during the rut on my camera. It was a new area to me, and he showed up middle of November in the night, just an absolute giant. And I was like, where's this deer coming from? So, I start looking, and I had a tag and gun season. So I went to the spot blind, never being there before. But like when I was looking at the map, when I was looking on Spartan Forge, I was looking at at LiDAR. And so I could see these big rocks, and there was some like bluff gaps in between them that were running down through. And then I could see with the leaf off imagery that there was laurel on the top and like strips of it kind of coming down. And so I went in, and I'm like, okay. And I went in there, and across the top was literally like, I want to say I stopped counting at 15 trail cameras that were on this top. Oh. And it was like craziness. And I was like, man, this is, is just wild. And I almost wanted to go away, but part of me was like, okay, there's a reason these cameras are here too, that there's a big buck coming here at some point. There's like, because it looked like it was, one person that was doing it for the most part, like similar cameras, kind of clustering them around. I was like, huh. But I was like, there was so much. And then there was also tree stands and stuff up there. I'm like, the pressure is like a lot of, and there was oaks and there was acorns on the ground and they were digging and they were doing all this stuff. And I was like, they're definitely coming up here, but I just can't see them doing that in daylight to come up. And anyways, I went down lower, but it was one of those things where to really learn it, I had to get in there. And at that point of the season, they just weren't, I just don't think they were taking pressure so well. And I probably blew some out while I was scouting, but I learned a bunch as far as like how they were moving. And this laurel patch is just, miles long that was going across. I was trying to figure all that out, but this in late season, I was like, man, I bet you they're dropping low, but I hadn't been in the very bottom. And so I went in there just the other day and this long story short, but I started trying to go through the laurel to figure it out. And I remembered why I hate walking through big waves of laurel. It's just impossible. And so I was just walking the edges down and I ended up seeing a bunch of deer down low right before dark, right when that thermal switch happened and came down. And there was one spot that I was like, I remember seeing on the map back in before I went in there in gun season. I was like, I bet early season, if there's acorns on this bench, that I could see them bedding up in these rock bluffs and in this laurel patch and dropping down through this gap and coming out. And I was up there and it was like, I don't know, 30 minutes before dark. And, I found a big scrape and I was like getting all excited like I do. And I'm like, oh, I'm going to hang a camera. And, this is April, but I'm like, I'm going to hang a camera and leave it here in case I don't get back to the spot. And I'm getting ready to climb up the tree to put my camera up. And I look and I watch 4 deer come through that gap and come down low. I'm like, yes, it's just like, but that was, associated with that thermal switch. And it's like, it dropped and you could just feel everything just get cooler because it was kind of a warm day and they're coming down through. I'm like, I bet, and there's a couple different places where I'd have to, really fine tune, not saying a buck would come through that specific one, but it's like, okay, I have some plans, for early on and to figure it out a little bit.
Isn't it so neat how, so I feel like the scouting is actually the funnest part throughout the season, and then scouting your way in as you hunt, and then really the kill, as exciting as it is, I don't want to take away from that because it is phenomenal, but it's like a confirmation of, hey, I was right. Like I did this and I came up with the right plan. It's basically just a confirmation, and that kind of like closes the whole theory or whatever, it's kind of neat.
It is. And the thing is, it's like, I love scouting, like you said, because like you visualize what's going to happen and you're thinking about it. But it's like, for me, I want to find 50 of those types of spots, because what's going to happen is I'm probably going to screw up multiple of them, like, in the process, whether I get too close or I climb the tree and they were in visual sight of me, because I at least if we're up in my areas that I see is just, there's no ag anywhere around. So there's not really a particular destination. So they'll like move around and bed in an area, but like in different spots, it seems like almost every day. And so like sometimes I'll pick a spot and I'll end up being too close, or maybe that day I'm out of the game or whatever. But it's just like, I want to have as many places and opportunities as possible, so that if I screw it up, it's just like getting more at bats, and then you learn from it. And especially in new areas, it takes a little bit to learn from.
Shots on goal. And it's good to hear you say that that's how I operate, because you are going to screw things up. Other people are going to screw things up. Food sources are going to screw you. There's so many things that happen that just changed the situation. And so if you have, 8, 10, 12, 15 places dialed pretty good, you're going to have a chance. You're going to have an opportunity. It might not be the biggest buck you have on camera, but, if that's the hunter that you're okay with taking 130, 140 inch deer, whatever, a mature buck for your area, we'll say. I shouldn't really use inches.
Yeah.
Just a mature buck. Then cool. If you are the guy that's targeting like the biggest, top 2% or whatever in your area, That's a lot. That's a lot more difficult.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
tough.
Oh, most definitely. But like, so I guess how many years has it been since you kind of switched to this? And we'll just call it the mobile hunting type of way of going in on public and bouncing around and really getting aggressive with these sets.
2021 was when I started doing that. I started the whole mobile thing, and I say that I was mobile-ish. I had a climber, and climbers are just fine. It's just that they're, to me, unless you pair one with a saddle, it's limited. I can't go up every tree, a tree with branches and all that. It just makes it more difficult. So in 2019, I started doing a little bit of saddle hunting, used some climbing steps from a guy that started a company called Bullman Outdoors.
Mm-hmm.
And so he was like, hey, you should try these out. So I'm like, all right. And I tried that out with the saddle, ring of steps, whole nine. And it was tough for me, and probably the worst decision ever, kind of, because I basically started with the toughest thing you could probably use, to not only ascend the tree, but to be comfortable while you're up there learning to saddle hunt also. Now I could use them no problem. But
Yeah.
I needed to start with like a really basic stick and all that. There also weren't that many saddle options then, and now, like, pick what kind of saddle you want. You want a single, double, you want it to expand, you can have it in whatever camo, you name it. So I really I guess I kind of dove pretty far into it when I met Jake. He was going to be a guest speaker at that year's show, and he invited me out to do some postseason scouting with him. And I'm like, all right, I'll give this a shot. Dude killed like, I don't know, like 186-inch deer or whatever opening week in Ohio. So I'm thinking maybe this guy knows something. So went out with him. We put in like 7 miles by lunch and found a bunch of beds. He showed me what beds look like. I was basically the guy that really didn't pay attention to a whole lot. And he showed me how to identify a few things, but probably the best thing he ever taught me was to simply ask why with everything. Like, why is this why is the hair under the leaves versus on top of the leaves? Why are the hoof prints on this side of the tree with the rub, and what does that mean? Which way is he headed, and just everything. Really learning how to pay attention and dissect everything you see, and you really can't go too deep with that. So it was pretty, I would say, low level thinking on my end still. Like, I wasn't what I would refer to as advanced by any means, and was actually kind of frustrated because I'd ask him questions about, a certain place or whatever. And he's like, well, it could set up differently or whatever. It's tough to know without being there. And I'm like, no, tell me. Like, you're the guy, man. Freaking tell me, dude. So, and then a couple years later, here I am saying the same thing to people, like, hey, I can tell you what I think with a pin, but you have to go there in person. So, the next year, so I ended up killing a nice buck on public. It was my first public Ohio buck. And then the following year, I dove in pretty heavy. I killed in Ohio first sit on opening day, which was really cool. Killed a gorgeous double drop tine buck, kayaked him out, and then ended up killing a buck in Kentucky 6 sits later on public down there in the Kentucky Hill Country. And then the following weekend, I did everything right until the archery part, and I missed a buck at last light on Indiana public, my first sit. So technically my 8th of the year. But so it's been an interesting little ride, I guess, just learning everything. I feel like I just started hunting, 2 or 3 years ago rather than back in 98. This year, I had a lot of plans. I did hunt. I I hunted a velvet season down south early on and struck out. And then here in Ohio, I got whipped pretty bad in Kentucky early season as well. We faced quite a bit of pressure. And then Ohio, I ended up getting on a pretty good deer and had an opportunity on my third sit and missed him. I misjudged the yardage and just blew it. It's about 140 inch 8. He was a gorgeous deer. And so that caused me to shift my cameras, and I ended up picking up that deer that I killed on October 15th and put him in the kayak 20 days later in November. So it was wild. I had plans to go all over the place and hunt, and once I got that deer, I thought, man, that's kind of a once-in-a-lifetime chance. Don't be afraid, don't just shoot whatever buck you see. This is probably one you should actually target, which I kind of got out of that. I used to do that on private a lot.
Yeah.
And then I started hunting public, and I'm like, well, a mature buck is a mature buck. Big antlers are great. I love them. Anybody who says different's crazy, but I love mature deer. And I have a lot more respect for every single one of them now that I know what they know or know what I know and how they survive and everything. So, if it's mature, I'm shooting him. But when I saw that deer, I thought you might want to give that one a go. So we put everything else on hold, and I ended up only getting to go to Kentucky after that, but I was able to kill a buck in Kentucky as well.
So how did you get on that deer? In which I'll have you show it to the people that are watching on the video side here in a minute, but it's an absolutely just stupid big deer. Like we were talking about scoring it before you got on there, and it was like I wouldn't even know how to score it because it's got basically two beams that on each side.
Yeah.
But it's
so
crazy.
I accidentally filmed that deer in May. We bought a new full frame camera to help do media for the expo, the podcast, the whole nine. We figured it was time to ditch the cell phones and start doing upper echelon quality stuff as best we could. So I thought, well, there's nothing better than going out and practicing with it on deer, in ag fields and stuff like that. So I thought, well, I'll go to a place where I know I can glass and stuff where I hunt and, see a few deer. Well, I had some deer at 350 yards away. I could just tell that they looked big, but they didn't have any racks that you could see from there. So I'm filming them. I got home and put my SD card in and blew it up in DaVinci. And I looked at my father-in-law. I'm like, what the hell's going on this deer's head? It's splitting everywhere. He had his bases and probably, we'll say 5 or 6 inches of antler base, high. And I thought, God, that thing's going to be just the nastiest looking monster. Who knows what that deer's going to do come July and August. So I prefer scrapes. I love finding the right scrape. I don't like just any scrape. And when you find the right scrape, you get pictures on them all year long. And it's better than any corn pile most people have hunted. They're daylight and everything, close to bed. So I have all these other deer on camera all year long, and I never had that deer on camera. And I thought, well, maybe that was one of those cases where a buck just decided to travel from far away or whatever. And that's why I saw him. Just a chance in a million kind of thing. Well, I ended up going scouting after I missed that deer. I was in a pretty bad funk. Had it all on film and everything. Did everything right. Was just to that point, my finest moment when it came to scouting, both e-scouting and then in person. And it was really pressure forced me to be aggressive with that deer. And after I missed him, I was just in a funk. So I thought, you know what? We'll take our bow, but today we're not worried about getting in a tree. Like if we have the opportunity, we'll get in a tree, but we're going to go find something today. And we're not going to be satisfied with anything less than phenomenal. And so I'm scouting my way through, and I hit this secondary ridge, and from the bottom nearly to the top is a red oak grove, and it is just raining acorns. It is crazy. And what blew my mind is here we are in mid-October when the deer should be pounding white oaks, and I mean, it's some of the better feed sign that I've seen in early season. And I mean, the leaves were just chopped to hell, acorn caps, crushed acorn shells everywhere. I was blowing deer out of there, and they kept coming back. And so as I'm creeping up this secondary ridge, I get to the edge of the red oak grove, and I looked up and I saw a lone beech tree with like 6 branches that are probably 4.5, 5 feet off the ground. And I just thought, oh shit. You know, I had hairs standing up on the back of my neck, man. I was like, I think I know what's going on here. And I walked like 10 yards closer, and I saw just a huge bare spot under it, and then a signpost rub. And I'm like, God, okay, let's get in a tree and we'll put a camera up when we leave. You know, we'll go ahead and sit this one out. I saw does and a young buck. Didn't see anything. I stick that camera up. Nothing even worth showing a little kid showed up for a couple of days. And then I had a young buck, probably a 2-year-old, hit the licking branch in daylight on that Friday, and then later that night that big one hit it. And so I get this picture notification when I wake up, and I look at it, and it's kind of blurry. So I thought, well, I wonder if that's the deer that I was targeting, because I was targeting a pretty high and tight buck anyway. That was probably in the 150 inch range. Could be 148, could be 153. I really don't know. Well, I send a video request. I use the Moultrie Mobile Edge one. Mm-hmm. So I had to send a video request. And of course, nothing walks in front of the camera for hours. So I have to wait until like 1 p.m. And finally I get, the daily test pick it sends, and that sends everything else through. And the video came through, and I freaked out. I was like, oh my God, I have an absolute mega on my camera. And so I sent it to a couple of buddies, and they did the same thing. Like, they freaked out. And they're like, man, you got to target him. I'm like, you ain't got to tell me. So it was very interesting, though, because I threw a couple sits at him and never did really see him. I also never had a daylight video or pic of that deer ever, other than when I filmed him in May. I never even got close. I think the closest I got was like 4 a.m. But I picked him up about 200 yards away on another scrape. And that's what really kind of told me how far he was, where he was traveling and kind of what he was doing. And I threw my last sit at him the night before I killed him. And I had found a ladder stand on the private that wasn't there when I had set that camera up. And I thought, damn, man, like, he's definitely avoiding that. And that's kind of what forced me to get basically in between the pressure. And I had found a scrape about a week earlier that was close to where I picked him up again on camera. And I went in to check it that Saturday afternoon, and it was wide open, had big tracks in it. There were buckeye trees just mangled, snapped in half, you name it. And I thought, well, this is probably him with that thick, tight rack. And I got in a tree, and I think I got set up like probably an hour and a half before the thermals started to switch. And when they started to switch, I had a couple does drop down off of one of the secondary ridges and come in. And then 30 minutes later, you felt everything kind of stabilize, and just the constant light breeze coming down the hill right in your face. And he dropped right down and Jay hooked that scrape, and I shot him at 13 yards. I couldn't even see him until he got under some honeysuckle. I was 8 feet high, and I drew my bow without even knowing what it was that was coming in. But I just had that feeling, and I didn't want to not have my bow drawn and have him show up. And of course it was him, and I shot him, and probably the most unique kill shot you could ever put on a deer. I misread the angle, basically hit him in between the shoulder and the body on his left shoulder, and it never entered the cavity. It went in between the shoulder and the body, went down the rib cage, and then came out and poked him in the back leg and came out. But I severed the brachial artery in the shoulder, and it's like an unreal blood trail, but they do stay alive for a little while. He actually, after I shot him, he ran about 60 yards and turned around and blew at me, and did it again later. And so I thought, oh my God, like, did you screw this up? And then my arrow had nothing on it, and it's like a white wrap, white fletching kind of arrow. So I'm like, what have you done? Like, I watched the arrow disappear. What happened? And then I started tracking where he ran, and Stevie Wonder could have followed that blood trail. So I backed out that night, came back the next day, because I was on the edge of private, and I'd push that deer, but I don't want to push him onto private, because if somebody tells you no, I mean, you'd basically have to break the law to go get him if you were going to go get him, and I can't do that. So I backed out and found him probably 40 yards from the private. So really, really, really lucky there.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. Like that is absolutely wild. And a couple things, when you said you found this scrape, like, and you said he dropped down, were you on the secondary ridge, or were you down in a draw in a hub, or like what were you?
I was down in a flat so basically, I would call it like interior edge. So there were a bunch of really big, like red oaks and white oaks. I think it was an old fence row or something. Mm-hmm. And then everything else. So these trees are probably like 40 to 60 feet. Like, they're big, big trees. And then the rest of them, there's a bunch of honeysuckle, a bunch of, hackberry and buckeyes that are anywhere from 6 feet to 15. So there was like a sub canopy. Yeah. And so you really couldn't get high up at all. So I literally put a one stick on a tree that put me at 7.5 feet. And then I went another foot or so with I put a beast stand up and sat there and killed him at like 8.5 feet. So it was wicked.
Oh my gosh, that is so cool. And what was the date on that?
I shot him November 4th.
Okay.
Yeah. So
and the other question I have is, and if I'm asking too many questions that would have someone figure out the spot, just tell me to stop. But like, when you were saying the private was up top, was that ag? So there's actually ag up top and down low. But I think, and this really won't give anything away, but I think there's more pressure up top, more hunter pressure up top. And I also think that those people, I'm going to sound like a nerd here, so bear with me, but I think they focus more on like traditional ag, beans, corn, stuff like that. And the fields down below have more native browse. And for me, like, it's tough to really touch natives. I feel like natives just create consistency, because for the most part, unless you have a psycho drought, they're always there. You can have acorns, not drop until later on, or, barely have any or way too many, but you always have that native browse. And it actually has
way more nutrients in it than people give it credit for. So I think that's probably why they move the way they do.
Yeah, no, that makes total sense. And man, I've said it so many times before. Like, there's a lot of areas that I hunt that don't even have oak trees. Like, there's no mass crop at all. But if they have good browse, and it's, you know, they got blackberry briars, and they've got different grasses, and they've have, you know, tulip poplars sprouts that are coming up, and they're eating on all these different things. Like, to me, the consistency year to year is there versus areas that are just mass or just crop focused that changes. You know, I'm thinking of year to year consistency versus just season, but it's like, that's why during the rut, it's like, I want areas that don't have that mass, that big, you know, food source that they're going to, because that can change so much. And then my spring scouting, which I've learned this from experience of, okay, that doesn't always translate to the next year, but in the areas that are like very consistent with having, you know, a lot of browse mixed in, and not saying it doesn't, you know, it can have acorns and other stuff there, but just having a lot of browse in an area is going to 100% make it a lot more consistent. And I want to be in those types of places, you know, more so than not.
Yeah, I think it's why we look for all that color diversity. You know, when you hop on Spartan Forge and you're looking at all the different maps and you see all the greens and everything coming together, you're like, oh baby, we know what's going to be here.
I literally explained that to some at the scouting camp that I had, and everyone was there, and I'm like, all right, so I said, to make it super simple, and I'm not talking down to anybody, but this is how I look at it. I'm like, you see a bunch of different colors on the map. Yes. Like, you start seeing different shades of green, and like, especially on summer imagery where it's like all these different shades of colors and things. It's like, boom, like that to me is a hot spot to at least check out. And then you find that spot within the spot once you get in there and actually scout it.
Yeah, that's a really good way to put it too, because I can't say this enough. You start getting into this different way of hunting, and you think that the best way I could put it is you're looking at, you know, first you look at it at I believe it will be a macro level, and then you look at it at the micro level, and you basically fine tune and dial it, and you start looking in those areas with all that browse, and you're going to find bachelor groups there year in and year out more often than not, as long as the pressure doesn't push them out.
Yeah, no, I agree with you there. Do you want to pick up the rack and show people? Oh man. And I apologize to anybody that's listening to the audio version, but you might want to look on YouTube because this thing is so cool. Just absolute giant of a deer. Man. And you were saying, like, with the way they measured it, like the G2s were like 17 inches.
Yeah, so it had a 17.25-inch G2 because they wouldn't count it as, they don't do like an actual extra beam. Mm-hmm. And then he had like a 10 and a 9-inch base, I believe, but I didn't get credit for that. They did like each individual, well, not each individual, but the two that they counted as beams. I think I got like 26 inches of mass on a deer that literally looks like he's pushing 40 inches of mass. But again, like I was telling you earlier, he could have been 130 for all I care, and I'd have still shot him and smiled just as big and everything. He was an absolute brute. He didn't weigh as much as I would have thought. He ended up being kind of like a stubby deer. He had a big head, big neck, big body, but he wasn't long and tall. So he wasn't as big as I would have thought. But he was right around 250 with guts in. But that's with guts in.
Yeah.
And I would have thought he would have been closer to like a 275 or something like that. Because looking at him on camera on those scrapes, I mean, he just looks like a horse with antlers.
Yeah.
So,
oh man, that's so cool. I remember when you were showing me, you'd sent me the picture when we were talking, and I was like, I've seen this before, and then realized I had seen it in the past, or from you posting it or someone sharing it with me. It's just like, dude, that's such an incredible deer.
It was crazy, man. It was a neat experience for sure.
So, it's to kind of transition a little bit here. We're going to talk about gear. We're going to talk about mobile hunting gear. And I think one thing is important is like you and I are people that like geek out. And you obviously, I mean, you started a whole expo on it. But as far as like with gear, and like I love gear too. I love finagling gear. I mean, that's how I got decided Timber Ninja. Like that's like everything is about. I love finding solutions to problems that you have and working with it. But you cannot replace what we've just talked about for the last 40 minutes. Is like you can't replace the good gear is not going to make you a better hunter. To me, it's you can be more efficient and more comfortable in your hunting, and there's ton of advantages of having good gear, but that's not the bones of it, and that's not a necessity. So it's like if like I love good gear, and I'm a buy once, cry once kind of person. I'll save up to buy something versus buying something cheaper and then having to replace it every year or whatever else. But like if it came down to me and it was like I needed to hunt or buy gear, I'm gonna hunt. But now that's where it's like, okay, I need to find ways to be able to get that gear because I enjoy having it.
Oh yeah. Yeah. That reminds me of, so I purchased my first rifle this year. We don't have a rifle season in Ohio. Like we've got the straight wall cartridge, but that's way better than a shotgun, but it's not anything close to an actual rifle. So I want to do some rifle hunts and stuff out west and down south. So I thought, I should pick one up. And a bunch of people were like, well, you could get a really, a 7 mil mag, PRC or whatever for elk and moose, and then get a 6.5 PRC or, whatever for smaller animals like deer and stuff. And like, man, what if I just bought one really good one and did the whole buy once, cry once thing? And there was no shortage of tears because I mean, it was an investment, but I just kept telling myself, divide it by 2 and then it'll feel better. So, but yeah, so I ended up going with the 6.5 PRC. I've been seeing guys dump elk at like 700 yards with them. So I'm like, well, I'm not going to shoot that far anyway. So we're good. But should be a good deer rifle.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. And I, talking about the gear, it's funny, like when in my early days of hunting, I was always like from the beginning, just because I've learned from my dad, like everything that I've learned for the most part has been from my dad, as far as at least steering me in a certain direction. And he had always hunted mobile. So, whether it was on the ground, whether it was with a climber, or hang on stands, he still puts out fixed sets and has those too. But like, there was always some sort of a mobile side of it. And I remember there's some pictures of me from, I don't know, 10, 12 years ago of me with like this big hang on stand on my back, and then like the guide gear sticks the steel ones.
Yeah.
And like carrying all those in, and like that was my mobile, setup. I wasn't taking it down every time I'd going in, but like, I'd move it around throughout the year, and I'd have that. And my climbers, if I had straight trees I could get in. I remember I first had what was the first climber I had? I can't remember, but it was a steel one. So super freaking heavy and just loud. And it was like terrible. I hated that thing. And then I got an API that was aluminum, and I'm like, man, this is the shit. Like, I feel super cool with this, and I didn't have the Summit money at that time from the client. So like, I had, I got this API that I got secondhand, and it was so funny, like seeing that evolution. And then, then I got a Hawk hang on stand. It was their helium when they first came out with that, and I still have that to this day, and got a set of their sticks, and I was like, oh man, this is so light. And then eventually moving into the saddle, and it's just like funny seeing that evolution of it. But for like, again, the guys that are like, oh man, I can't get into this yet, or I'm not sure what I want, at first it's like you don't need everything, but it's it definitely makes things a lot nicer now when I'm going in. And it's like, okay, it's like if I'm using the Timber Ninja Nano saddle, it weighs like 16 ounces, and the platform, the sticks and stuff, I'm like 8 pounds all in and I can get up in a tree and like, so I'll walk around and scout with it. I'm like, man, would I have died to have this stuff, years ago.
Yeah. So shooting archery at the competition level a few years back, I learned a lot about focus. And I think that's something that people take a lot more for granted than they should, on the hunting side of things. And kind of where I'm going is a lot of people don't realize how much that nutrition, hydration, and how tired, physically exhausted you are or comfortable can affect your actual focus and the reason why you've actually showed up here today to come kill a deer. So I feel like when you do get that more comfortable, whether it's a stand, saddle, you name it, or just a little better pair of sticks, a little lighter, more packable, whatever. If you're upgrading, and the upgrade doesn't have to be the top of the line stuff. You don't have to do that. And that's, obviously, the guy that runs the gear show is telling you that you should get gear, but it helps so much with your focus. And I think that when you're focused, you have time to think about the things you actually need to think about rather than complaining over and over again in your mind, like, oh, I'm really uncomfortable. This sucks. I can't wait to get down, kind of thing. And instead you're like, okay, I feel the thermals starting to switch. Oh, okay, they're stable now. Turn the camera on and get your bow in your hand. Because if he's coming, he's probably, on his way in the next couple minutes. So it's just one of those things where I think I see a lot of people down it and they think that gear shouldn't be a focus, but I think education on gear should absolutely be a focus. How to properly ascend and descend a tree, how to properly hang a stand, stick set, a saddle, tether management for a saddle is so freaking crucial. And you always hear these people over and over again. I see it every day. They're talking about hip pinch and how they can never get comfortable. I'm like, well, you probably just don't have a saddle that fits you. And you're also probably not managing your tether right. You're probably in a tree that's leaning and you're not swinging your tether around like you should. But if you don't know, you don't know. And until somebody teaches you, like somebody taught me one day and blew my mind, well, you're not going to know. And then you're going to be like, saddles are stupid. But when in reality, they're actually pretty nice. Now, I'll go on record and say, I do think that, it's tough to beat a summit climber when it comes to comfort, and then followed by a regular tree stand. But I didn't come here to take a nap or bask in the sun. I came here to kill a deer. If I want to be the most comfortable I've ever been in my life, I'll stay home. It's already not comfortable walking 1-2 miles, kayaking, whatever. Like, you didn't come here to be comfortable. You came here to kill a deer. So when you learn how to control the blood flow in your legs, whether you're a sitter or a leaner, how to adjust your tether and your bridge and everything, and get the right size saddle, wear the right clothing, get the right boots, then you end up being a lot more comfortable and you're more focused and you're a better hunter.
Yeah, man, I couldn't have said it any better. Like that, I agree with that so much. And like, that's why I've harped for years on like layering systems for clothing and knowing how to manage your moisture when you're hiking in. And I'd heard one guy was saying to me, he's like, oh man, that Fanatic jacket from Sitka, I just get cold in it. I'm like, what? I'm like, I hunted -20 in Alberta in it. Like, what are you talking about? And then, I'm finding out that, they're wearing it walking in. And I'm like, well, yeah, you're going to sweat like crazy. I get cold too. And so it's just like, and that was one thing that I grew up not knowing. Like we'd wear light clothing, but I always wore cotton, and it was just like, you'd sweat, and I had my Army BDU pants and I would just layer sweatpants underneath it. And it was just like, you had one jacket, basically. It was your hunting jacket. So when it was hot out, you were hot. When it was cold out, you were cold. And like, as I learned that, it was like, man, I'm so much more comfortable. There's not a temperature or a weather condition I'm afraid of anymore to go out, and you can be comfortable with learning that. And the same thing goes with mobile hunting equipment and climbing into the trees. And I think the part that what you had said about the education aspect, and practicing with your gear and knowing it. You got to know it like the back of your hand so that you could have your eyes closed and climb up that tree, get in there quiet. If you're trying to get close to bedding, it's like you don't want to be banging things around. Know where there's stuff that's going to make noise, tape it up, or, do those things and run through those dry runs, because that helps out so much.
100%. Real quick, how many pairs of socks did you used to wear?
Oh yeah, as many as I could.
You wear hikers, I assume now?
Yeah, I do. I started the Darn Tough hiker train probably in I know it was 2016, because I still have a couple of the original pairs that I have, and it's like, yeah, I do that, and then my boots are like, leather, lightly insulated or uninsulated that I'll wear, and then just put boot blankets over top of it when I'm up in the tree, or find a way to insulate your feet from it. Like, there's so many things that I'd wear the 1,600 gram rubber boots, and I hated walking them. I had no ankle support, and then my feet would sweat so bad. I tried chains and socks, doing all this different stuff, and it was like, and now I have like a system that works for me. But were you the same way?
Every bit. And it's so funny, going back to just simply education, the funny gif, the more you know. Like, I used to wear rubbers or leathers, and then I'd put 3 pairs of socks on and then wonder why my feet were cold. Well, my core was dropping temperature, pulling blood out of my extremities. And oh, by the way, I'm cutting the living hell out of my circulation off with all my tight socks and boots. And like, that's what happens to people every year. And they're like, oh, these boots don't work. And it's like, well, I don't think it's the boots. You don't need to put on a Sherpa to keep your feet warm. You actually have to keep them dry, and then manage your blood flow and your core temperature. And then that helps keep the blood flow in your extremities. Same reason why your hands and everything else get cold. So, you notice your ears and your nose and stuff getting cold. Well, that's why. So now I just I run the Zamberlans uninsulated, the Lynx with, I'll use the Darn Tough socks quite a bit. Those, man, I don't know if I hate to say this, but I have not found a better sock yet than Darn Tough. They're very good, and there's a lot of them that have been touted pretty good. The alpaca socks are supposed to be good and stuff like that, but dude, Darn Tough, they're darn tough to beat, basically,
Yeah. Where's Darn Tough at sending us money here?
Right?
But but seriously, like, I have them for my gyms. Like, I wear to the gym. I have low no-show merino ones that I wear trail running and do. Like, they're on my feet at all times, every day, all day, and that's just the way that it is, and because they've been tough to beat. And I bought some like on sale, different merino ones and stuff, and they either wear out too quick, they don't hold their shape, they start getting kind of loose and saggy. I'll go on hunts, I'll be out west, and I'll go for 14 days, and I'll bring 3 pairs of socks. So it's like, it's important for them to hold their shape and go through that.
Yeah, 100%, man. Drying out quick too is phenomenal.
Yeah,
there's nothing like sitting a sock out, and 45 minutes later, it's dry. You're like, damn, that's okay. We can put these back on a little bit.
Yeah. Oh yeah. 100%. So, like, talking about the expo a little bit, and what was your reason for wanting to start the Mobile Hunters Expo, and like, what was your reasoning behind it, and what are kind of your goals with it?
So, kind of goes back to what you said, solving a problem. Anybody who's been at this for more than just a couple of years remembers the day when there were only a few options, and guys would buy setup after setup, and then 3 weeks later or whatever, a month later, whatever, you'd see it on Facebook for sale. And then they'd be searching for something else, and you just saw so much turnaround, and you would see all these questions, and the education wasn't there. And so I thought, man, what if, like, you can't try this stuff at Bass Pro and all these other big box stores? What if we came up with a place, I basically said there needs to be a place where you can try it. Well, I had a couple of people reach out to me. One was a gear company, and then the other was the scoring company, and they wanted to do like some meetup style events. And I thought, oh, cool. And then I thought, what if we put those two together? Then we could have more people and each one would benefit. And then immediately, light bulb goes off in my head, and I'm like, we should invite everybody to this and just try to get a really big crowd and give people the opportunity to meet the owners of these companies and the marketing directors, all the guys they see online that they follow and like, and be able to try this stuff before they buy it and then walk out. And oftentimes, a lot of people, you guys all run show sales and stuff, so they get a little discount as well. Nobody's got to pay shipping. And then the other thing, in our day and age, you don't even have to wait for the shipping. So you just get it today. And so at first, I really had no idea what I had at all. Our first show, we had like 10 vendors and 200 people. And while I felt like it was a success and everybody had fun and the companies made money, the people that came as guests, they felt better educated and they got good deals and the whole nine. And it was just kind of like a preseason deer camp. I just wanted to make it bigger and better. And so the following year, we did like a guest speaker thing. We had a one sticking demo at the show and a DRT and SRT demo at the show, which was neat. I had no idea what the hell that was. And then I watched and I was like, oh, that's pretty damn cool. So the following year, we had like Greg Staggs, Jake Bush, Jacob Emery, and Aaron Ritter, and they did, their own little respective speaking sessions, which was really cool. And that year, I think we had like 37 vendors and 400 people. Well, then last year, we had nearly 60 vendors at 2 shows. So we went from having one that was basically in our backyard in Southern Ohio to doing a show in Tennessee at a big convention center, and then another one at an expo center in Michigan. So it was kind of like an away game each time. And we more than doubled in size again. We had 900 and 1,000. And the crazy part is that a lot of the people that come to the show, even though we don't have 5, 10, 50, 75,000 people rolling through, the companies actually do really good business because you have a niche group that's basically doing their homework and showing up. They've got an idea of basically a few things they want to try out and they buy it. And so talking to some of these guys, it's been interesting because they're making as much or more at this show than they are at some of these shows that have ridiculous amounts of people. And so I was like, oh, why? I didn't expect that. That wasn't a part of the plan, but good for you. Like, I'm happy for you. So goals moving forward, though. I don't know how big the actual expo can really get simply because it's a niche. We're never going to be the PA, Great American Outdoor Show. We're never going to be that. What's that?
I'm glad that you're not going to be.
Yeah. Well, it's funny you say that because we've gotten that same comment from vendors where it's like, man, we get a weekend of talking deer hunting and not having, basically people that are just out for a Saturday with no intentions of buying anything. If they're going to travel from whatever state and pay whatever to have a booth and all that and hire a crew. And I mean, I don't have to tell you, right? Yeah. So, it's nice to just be able to focus on the customer every single time rather than, basically like a tire kicker. And then on top of that, they do really good sales and just, it's more of a relaxed environment with a lot of camaraderie, more than anything. And all the people support each other. So like you'll see a lot of guys that, oh, you don't like this saddle or this stand, go over there and try theirs then. And so there's collabs that happen between companies and it's really cool. It's like a really positive environment on all fronts. And that is probably one of our biggest goals is just trying to change how people treat each other within the industry. And then moving forward, we have crazy big plans for conservation. I hope that it does well enough one day to where we can purchase lands and essentially turn them into draw only public, but that's not controlled by the state. We control it and we hire someone to patrol it and stuff like that. So, but that's like long-term, really big goal.
Yeah. Yeah, you got to dream big with it, or you'll
Swing
never
for
have
the
a chance to hit those goals. But and for me, I think it's cool for the end user because, like you said, you don't get to try that stuff all the time. Like I look at it all the time with us at Timber Ninja. It's like, all right, we sell expensive stuff. All this stuff isn't getting cheaper to make. It's okay, so for someone, I get why people would want to test it and try it on, and the fact that you can get all these different companies in one room, and in a couple hours you could go try all these different saddles or tree stands or sticks, or like just test it all out is awesome. And the other part too of that is just the you were talking about the camaraderie aspect, because like you go on, and there's benefits with Facebook groups and stuff, but sometimes they can get pretty nasty. And most of the time those people, if they'd be in the same room, it wouldn't be at each other's throats like that. And it's like, and everyone gets along. So you almost get like this big deer camp vibe to it of like everybody hanging out. And I've learned that so much about events. And it's like, I do think social media has a really good positive impact in a lot of ways. And then there's other ways where it's like, it does not, where people are arguing and fighting about things. Like, man, we all love to hunt, and we all love gear. That's why, trying to become better with it. It's like the shows, people are telling stories, they're showing trail camera photos and talking about it. What's worked? Oh, I didn't really like, this saddle. I didn't really like this method. One stick and look cool, but it wasn't for me. Or maybe this person's like, oh, it was for me. But that's not the same conversation as you'd see online you'd have in person.
Yeah, it's it's funny to hear you say that. We run into that all the time. Like, people say some of the craziest stuff online. Again, I don't have to say that to you, but they get that screen, and it's just like the freedom to say whatever they want. And it's funny because a lot of people will blame the social media, but it's just how people kind of are. And then you forget. And then what's interesting is that same person, 99 times out of 100 would never say that in person, even to somebody that they could whip, they just wouldn't do it. It's just not human nature generally, if you were raised even halfway right. So it is nice to get in person and to meet all the people from all the different companies, and new companies popping up, and then all these guys that you talk to on Facebook all year long might ask you a question, or you might ask them something, and you just kind of chat back and forth, and then they show up to the show, and you get to meet in person, and it's just the coolest thing ever, because it's like kind of like a big family reunion almost. It's pretty cool.
Yeah, and it's like too, it's even what I think is what's funny, like when it was last year, when Jake was working at Latitude, and I am part of Timber Ninja, so I was like, Jake, you want to come on the podcast? And and people would message me like, oh, competitor, you've had him on the I'm like, dude, we're all buddies. Like, who cares who works for what? Like, I'm friends with anybody at any of the other companies. Like, I don't see, everyone makes products for a reason that they believe is the best for a certain scenario. And sometimes there's products that, say that we would make that I'll be like, hey, that's not for this person. And, this is a better option for you. And that's the way it is. And that's why it's nice. We live in America. We're free to do what we want and spend our money with who we want and be able to do that. And that's why I love shows. Like I like conversing with people. I like hanging out and whether it's talking business or talking hunting or whatever, it's really cool to be able to have that and have those places. And I think that I love in-person events. Like, obviously it's tiring. It's mentally taxing by the end of them, but like to be able to have that experience and have that one-on-one when everything is so much more screen time now, it's nice to have those connections.
Yeah. I think, when social media started getting big, it really increased screen time. And then when we had the whole COVID thing and everybody went remote and learned that they could do that even more, it seemed like it kind of took over a lot of aspects of everyone's life. And even to this day, I've got buddies where I'm like, hey, like, we need to hang out for real. Like we, FaceTiming or something, like we should go scout or we should go have a beer or whatever, like I understand we've chatted and everything, but like you need to see people. You got to get out of your house, dude. Like you can't just stay there all the time. That's bad for you.
Yeah, no, it's that's so true. And it's just, there's so many ways to connect online, which is cool. Like I said, it is great that we have that ability, but it's to me, it's way better to be able to speak in person, hands-on products, talking to people, having a good time. And like, that's why I'm super excited about there being a show in Pennsylvania this year. I think it's going to be killer. I mean, anyone, listen to this, people are listening to this podcast. It's like majority of people are from Pennsylvania or surrounding, and it's just like, there's such a hunting culture here. I think you're going to be pumped when that show happens. Yeah.
It's been our most requested, like most sought after, both on the attendee side and the vendor side. Like PA is going to be a barn burner. It'll be fun. It's going to be a party.
Yeah, it should be good. So I'll be doing some speaking there, presentation of some sort. And who else is going to be there talking?
So we will announce that here probably in, we'll say 3 weeks. Okay. We've got one more spot to lock down, and then I'm going to get with you guys on how we're going to go about announcing that, to the general public, and then, we'll go from there. But I'll talk to you after this. Okay. But we try to, that's generally one of the ways that we run like a marketing ad and everything. So we'll keep that under wraps for now. I should have told you that before, but
no, that's good. And yes, but yeah, well, I broke the ice that I'll be there, but I already told people that anyway. Yeah. But yeah, I think that'll be super cool. And the dates are August, what again? I had it over here.
August 9th, 10th, and 11th.
Okay. So
open to the general public. Tickets available online at the mobilehuntersexpo.com, but you can also buy them at the door. They're $20. And then we'll probably do some discount codes for each one of you guys that are guest speaking that have some form of platform, and they can save a couple bucks that way, and everybody wins.
Well, yeah, I'm looking. It's like, and if you want to go for all 3 days, you basically get 1 day free because it's $40 for it to be able to go. That's cool. And then the Southern show is, was it June 28th and 29th, 30th?
Yep. That's down in Dalton, Georgia.
Okay. And then what about the Northern show?
That one's July 26th through 28th, and that's in Kalamazoo, Michigan.
Nice.
Yeah. Oh, and these are open to the general public. This isn't like, some of the, this isn't like ATA or anything where it's dealers only. Like this is a consumer show open to the general public. We're not going to like sell out of tickets or anything like that. You're fine to come and pay at the door, basically, is what I'm getting at. So, kids, I should mention, kids 12 and under are free, and anyone who is an active duty or a veteran of our U.S. Armed Forces, as well as LEO, any kind of first responder, they're 50% off. And we actually have the, what's it called? Like, something X. It's like for government, military.
Oh yeah, GovX.
GovX. Yep. I'm like leading myself to it without knowing. We have the GovX, online, so you can use that if you want, or you can just come and show your ID at the door, and we'll give you your discount there.
Nice. Well, that'll be awesome. So yeah, the mobilehuntersexpo.com. You can find all that information there, and the one in PA too. I don't think we mentioned it, was Mannheim, Pennsylvania, so over by Lancaster.
Yep, it's where they hold the Lancaster Classic at Spooky Nook Sports.
Okay, yeah, Awesome. It's funny. I was talking to some people at the Great American Show, and I was talking about this show coming up. And at the time I was like, I want to say, and then I looked it up on my phone and I was like, Manheim. And they're like, oh, because the amount of people that hunt in that area, like you picked, I'm sure that's probably why you picked that area. But.
It is. Yeah. I've been there a couple of times, over in the Lancaster area. And the amount of amazing looking ground over there. The Amish are very fruitful in that area as well. And so, and I figured, probably the best archery shop in the country, if not at least east of the Mississippi, is there for a reason and thriving. So,
yeah.
I figured, well, that's probably a pretty good area to have it.
Yeah, definitely. Well, Christopher, where can you tell people to follow along with what you have going on here? And where can people find more information other than the website?
So we've got the Mobile Hunter Facebook group. We do a lot of posting in there about the shows. And we also have the Mobile Hunter podcast and YouTube channel. We'll do a lot of interviews with a lot of the vendors, and hoping to have you on there as well for a very high-level whitetail series. And then we have the business pages that are just the Mobile Hunters Expo on both Facebook and Instagram that you can choose to follow along. And we announce every single vendor that comes through. And I think that's one thing that makes us a little different is we work to get our vendors out there and their products so people see who's going to be at the shows and everything. And they can show up with a really good sort of educated plan on what they want to try. Maybe they've got limited time or whatever, or they've got the wife and 2 kids, one in a stroller, and they're just trying to get in there and try XYZ and get out. So that's pretty much where you can follow along, though, is on Facebook and Instagram, our business pages. And we've got the website, of course. And again, we'll talk about it on the YouTube channel and podcast.
Sweet. Well, thank you. I really appreciate you coming on and sharing this. And like I said, I'll be at the one in Pennsylvania there and doing speaking, and then I'll be at the Timber Ninja booth throughout the days there. So I'll be there. And then, man. And if anybody's in some of the other locations, whether you're in Georgia or Michigan, check it out.
Heck yeah, man. Looking forward to having a few beers with you.
Yeah.
Thanks for having me on.
Yeah. Thank you.
Hey guys, thanks so much for listening. If you enjoyed this conversation, share it with your buddies. Leave us a rating, a review, and subscribe. If you want to check out more content like this, there's plenty in the links below. We truly appreciate having you guys along with us.